This is Zero Signal, where security leaders stop waiting for certainty and start leading through it. I'm Conor Sherman.
And I'm Stuart Mitchell.
Let's get into it. Zero Signal is brought to you by Sysdig. Threat actors are compromising cloud accounts in under 8 minutes. Vulnerabilities are being exploited within 10 hours of disclosure. That's the defender's window, and it keeps closing. Attackers aren't waiting on dashboards. They go straight for what's running. Real time is the only timeline that matters. And that's why Forrester named Sysdig a leader in its latest wave for the cloud-native application protection platforms. Runtime is where real risk shows up, and runtime is what Sysdig is built for. So stop watching and start defending. Learn more at sysdig.com and check out the link in the description. Zero Signal is brought to you by RiskPoint. When the mission is on the line, you don't want a vendor. You want to work with people who've actually been there. I've worked with RiskPoint directly. Together, we took an organization from zero to FedRAMP moderate across a real cloud footprint, and a business unit from zero to CMMC, and we did it all under 9 months. That happened because this team had done it before and moved at the speed the work demanded. Trust, experience, and pace, right when I needed all three. They call it security and compliance made human. Practitioners, not salespeople. In it with you for the long haul, from readiness all the way to authorization. FedRAMP, CMMC, SOC 2, and cloud. Where you go for advice matters. And if you're staring down an audit or an authorization, go to riskpoint.com. That's RISCPOINT.com. Check out the link in the description. Welcome. So today on Zero Signal, we are speaking with Matt Hillary, the CISO for Drata, a security leader who's built programs at AWS, Adobe, Infrastructure, Weave, Lumio, and you've been arguing and making this argument for a while now that the CISO role is starting to transform into the Chief Trust Officer. So I'm really glad for you to have you joining on the show today.
Hey, Conor and Stu, thanks for having me. I always appreciate the work you guys do in the community. It definitely makes it just an awesome experience for all of us to learn from the people you bring on and yourselves as well. So thank you.
Super. So let's just bust right in it because I'm really stoked to finally get you like on the pod, and we got this in person too. So let's go right into the trust officer piece here because they're to show my cards. I think you're correct. I think there's something happening here where our role as CISOs is changing as the needs of the business are changing. So why don't you just kind of ground us there? Like, what led you to this thinking that the CISO is transforming the trust officer? And then the question I have that goes with that is this really just kind of shuffling the decks around and putting a new title on it? Or is there actually a substantive change in expectations that's happening?
Sure. I'm not super convinced that the true new CISO title is going to be the Chief Trust Officer, but I do feel like because of the nature of how many just questions that come in from customers, it seems to be the CISO that seems to be in that front line out answering those questions. Seems like a majority, especially in B2B SaaS, especially security B2B SaaS, we get a lot of questions and most of those are directed straight to the CISO. In some cases, the CISO also wears a number of other hats, like privacy or others. And so a majority of those questions around building trust around the foundational security practices, the foundational privacy practices, the foundational just operational practices. And just by nature, the CISO needs to really know so much about the organization to the point that they almost become the authority in speaking on that front line in front of customers to answer their questions. But at the same time, I think about my GRC and security teams. I'll sit down with them and we'll do our annual objective planning and what our key results are going to look like for the year. And, security teams barking like, hey, I want to secure the company. I want to burn down these vulnerabilities. I want to get my security score to 100% with burning all my criticals and highs down. And then they're also like, we also want to get a detection response in a case it's totally capable. And now it's like, I want to have AI driving all of that. And then they're like, those are our objectives. And then I go to the GRC team, like, man, we want 0 exceptions on our audits. And we want to make sure we add this additional framework and we want to do these things. And I was like, why? Why do you want to do all of those things? And, sometimes the, director of security is like, that's kind of a funny question. What do you mean, Matt? Why? You're a security practitioner, you've been a GRC practitioner. Why are you asking me why? And I'm like, no, but why? And it ultimately comes down to building and maintaining the trust of others, whether that be internal or external. So I manage our IT team as well. And so internal, that trust matters a ton. So when I work with them, they're always customer centric or customer success score, that CS or CSAT score usually is really high. It shows hey, the people really trust our people and they're also caring at the same time. But externally facing, that's a really key measure that we want to make sure that, hey, when customers come with questions, even if they're questions that are like, that's the dumbest question, or hey, this is a question that actually makes a lot of sense, or oh shoot, like we're not doing what they're asking us to do here.
Yeah.
It's a really incredible learning experience to really up level our program. And so when I think about trust in general as well, like just relationships with others, being open, being vulnerable, being honest, not avoiding or softening what you want to say, but say it in a way that's not too harsh or critical. Like you think of a relationship with other people, like that's how trust is built. And it's that consistency over time. And so extrapolating that to our roles as CISOs and leading this just trust function internally to continue to doing what we're saying we're doing, we're being open and vulnerable about it. When there's a security incident that we're having bias towards, just being open and just writing, say, this is what we learned, this is what happened. Hopefully you can learn from us. Hopefully we can all grow together. It seems to be one of those kind of chill feeling of like, hey, we're really building trust not only between people, but organizations. And so I think there's one last comment around just integrity in general. A number of the anxiety attacks that I felt as a CISO in the past has largely been before audits, or obviously before or learning something recently about, hey, some vector hit us that we didn't expect, or being on stage or doing podcasts and stuff like that. It's also another big factor there. But when I think about, why, I was like, why am I getting anxious about this audit? Like, we're doing everything. It's like, it's around integrity and like, hey, if we miss something here, that may hit our integrity here and like what we hold as a security and in the community as well, but like also our organizations. And so it's a long answer, but different facets kind of drive me through, hey, who does that? Now, is the CISO the end all be all for establishing trust and being that chief trust officer of the company? I don't think so. And I think that's why it may not go into the space, because you still need to have an amazing customer experience team that really takes care of customers. You still have to have an amazing delivering product team. You have an amazing executive team that has values, that really care about their people and about their customers. You really need to, as cohesive company, really caring about that end result and consistently delivering that over time. That's where the real trust is built. We're just one material foundation stone in that whole story. So that's kind of how I think about, hey, chief trust officer versus chief security officer. I don't know, but it's definitely a component, I think, of our role that's so important for us to be successful.
Do you think because you work for a security company that feels probably a little bit more exaggerated versus, I don't know, even stepping outside of SaaS, let's think about like a manufacturing company where maybe people aren't looking at you from a security perspective as that's why we buy your product. Do you feel it's exaggerated because of the company you work for?
I think so. So that's a super just insightful question, largely because you're right. I think the pressure is much higher on us in this space. Like when I came out on Drata, I was like, oh man, I think I CISO 4 times. Like one was at Instructure, one was at Weave. We were public at Weave, one was at Workfront, and now at Drata. And I was like, oh man, this role is like 3x the role. Like you have the field phase of it, but also the stakes are so much higher. Like if we are hit by an incident, and we've seen security companies in the recent past get hit by incidents, and I think I heard even the president of that organization come on a large community and say, we realize even as a security company, like trust is built in drips and lost in buckets, and we realize we lost this amount of trust in buckets in this case, and we want to build that back little bit by little. But the reality is, I think the stakes are higher. But I've been at organizations where I was a door-to-door solar company, and we were going to build like a SaaS component too. And that's the part that I was excited, is securing the SaaS company, but like component. But we ended up not doing that, and it went back to kind of door-to-door sales. I'm like, this is not B2B SaaS. And like, do we care about this much? Sure, we care, but it is definitely not the highest stakes as like SaaS, B2B SaaS, or B2C SaaS, or even security B2B SaaS, which you're right, the stakes are so much higher. And the pressure just mounts more and more every day because you're like, oh, what are we going to get hit with this time? I think at the end of the day, I actually learned a lot from those security companies and how they responded.
I mean, you have to become a PR company, right? I think like you look at CrowdStrike and what happened. I've lost track of time, but it feels like 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and it was just a masterclass in PR. And so I think in a role like yours, it's okay, like something inevitably probably will go wrong. I hope it doesn't, but there is. And it's like, okay, like, and Drata have such a wonderful community of champions, customers, etc., who really lean into that. So it is like, it's not necessarily will something bad happen. It's how are we going to get our community to get behind us? Because you're right, like it is wiped out overnight. And that goes back to that chief trust officer component.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always loved working with chief marketing officers of the PR team, where integrity really is a part of their story, even with legal officers. Because I mean, the first call I always make is it's that unofficial marriage between me or the CISO and the CLO, where it's like, we got to be just so close. So you're going to be the first call. If I call you 3 times in a row, it means, dude, something's wrong.
So funny enough, I was working with a CEO, and CEO is like, very mindful of security events and like, having a breach. He's like, Connor, something happens. I need to be your first call. And I said, no. He looks at me and I'm like, you're my second call. My first call is to our chief legal officer.
Yep,
and
yep.
there's a reason for this. And I walked into the whole process. He's like, yeah, you're my second phone call, not my first phone call. That is the truth of it. Yeah.
You're so true. And the ones that really, really do care, it is amazing to be able to sit down, like, let's just lay it all out. I'm going to tell you what's going on. And it's something of a safety net to be like, also just as a peer, there's also, I think, a third call in there, which is like a peer CISO in the community that you really just have that.
Yeah.
It's like the confidentiality provisions cannot be more tight than a close connection with other CISO where you can just say, look, I just need your advice. This is what's happening. What can I do? And it's amazing the CISO community is so just full of integrity where you can have those kind of conversations to get that additional advice. But I like your order as CLO, CEO, and friend.
Where does your wife fit in that order in terms of when I'm calling like, hey, like I'm not coming home for dinner for
last major breach? It was on our 10-year anniversary.
Oh my gosh.
We're on
They
holiday.
probably knew.
Exactly. Wait. And the worst part is, it was a subsidiary that had been popped before acquisition, before I joined, and the threat actor just sat on the data for 3 years, and they just waited for that weekend. And my poor wife is just sitting in this coffee shop, like twiddling her thumbs, and I'm like, I'm working the phones, I'm going to Leo, doing the whole thing. And she's like, so do we get to stay? I'm like, no, we have to cancel our dinner reservations and make our way home. And that became the next 3 months of my life. So yeah.
For the breach reparations, you're like, hey, we got this cost. Also, I need at least $1,200 in therapy to help me restore my relationship with my spouse.
$5,000 from Chanel. Like
that should be part of the recovery process. I 100%. So actually, I saw this, going back to the trust piece here, I saw this study from McKinsey, which I thought had a really interesting headline, and it was around AI adoption. And they used the word trust, and they said 59% of the organizations that were surveyed by this McKinsey study said that AI governance was what was the principal reason they were having a hard time bringing AI into their into the enterprises. And it all came back to this idea, like, do we trust moving these business processes to this? Do we trust what we're hiring, so on and so forth? I'm just kind of getting your take on the security leader. I have kind of a thesis and I'll get your reaction to it. I think the CISO role is starting to have 3 core components to it. So we've always had security, which is like, show me that I'm free of an adversary. We work really hard to answer that question. Then there's the safety, which is becoming more of an orientation towards AI. Does the system work within the boundaries it's giving? And then reliability. Will this system process work under adverse circumstances? I've always kind of viewed those 3 as like the core ingredients of trust. Love to get your reaction to that. And then love to get your reaction to, like, if you were giving counsel to a CISO who's trying to help their organization get across that divide so they can bring in the AI workloads that the CTO and the CFO and all that wants to bring in, how to navigate that. So kind of just 2 thoughts there.
Man, I think you nailed it there when you talked about building trust. What are those components, right? The safety, the reliability, the defensible outcomes you're hoping to see with AI. And I think most of us want it to get to a point where the AI agents that we're either relying on other companies to purposely build for us, or the AI agents or AI capabilities we're building internally, are ones that we can truly defensively trust. Largely because, man, there's so much life to be living in the space of creative thought that we really want to do as humans. That higher order level thinking is so much more fun and so much more, I don't know, dopamine ridden, in the sense of my brain is just dopamine depleted. We're like, I want to build, I want to think of new cool stuff. And it's like, cool, can you do all the operational stuff? And I think our hope is to get to that point where we really can trust that. And you're right, those are the components that we need to build trust in over time to get to that point. You're right, there's many organizations though that are like, man, can we put critical flows into this space? What do we need to do? Similar to building trust between organizations and even people, I think that level of trust, that consistency over time, again, that defensible outcome is what we're hoping for. And sometimes the rage that I feel around technology seems to be exponentially hit when it's like an AI response that you're like, no. I think I recently saw something funny where organizations are starting to have, HR conversations with team members that are basically, being really, really aggressively mean to their AI, the interfaces and I'm like, and I think I said this prompt to my CTO saying, hey, please tell me we're not one of those organizations that's going to get rid of me for being so mean to AI, because the response that it gave back was like, we are going way off the rails here. This is not what I expected. But I think ultimately we do want to get to that point where we can trust these to that point. Now, how do we get to that point? You're right. I think there's a lot of concern around the discoverability of it. I think recently I chatted about, I was trying to internally, we're building agents we're building agents on our platform. And then we have obviously people internally on the go-to-market side or our IT side. We're using many tools on the IT side to help respond. And even on the security side of the number of things, we're building these AI capabilities that are just so important for our scalability and our growth. But at the same time, it's like, oh man, some of these are cobbled together to the point that it reminded me of the Toy Story 4. I don't know if you watched the movie where like there's this cute little girl puts together like this toy called Forky. And if you're aware, Forky is like this fork with like, like this pipe cleaner and like little like, there's popsicle sticks and googly eyes, right? And walking around and their toys are like, what the like just walked in, like it was Forky, and like, hi, I'm trash. Like, I feel like it's no different than sometimes the AI capabilities we're building internally, where we don't even look at a line of code that we just had, console or Core put together, Cloud Code or Core put together, or is this doing what we expected to do? But we're like, hey, so we have these little Forkies running amok around our organization. And so I think a lot of the concern is around how do we discover all these, right? And what does it look like to govern those? The governance piece is really interesting. I don't know if you ever use like a tool like Little Snitch on your Mac forever ago. It's like this network transaction monitoring capability where you're like, yeah, I want to reach out to this. I'm like, yes. And after the 100th yes, you're like, dude, I don't even care. Like, just get this off my machine. Just access whatever you need to. I think the governance piece around AI agents is going to be interesting too, where you're like, I don't have to authorize everything, but I definitely want to give you like the scope of what's okay. And that's another piece of the trust story is like, how much as a human do I want to be bothered by this? Like at some point we're just like, YOLO, full send. Just like do whatever you want to do. Obviously, we're going to be careful and put some guardrails around it. But our hope is as well, just to really to be not.
It might have been an organization recently that took a high-powered model, put it on the cyber bench thing, and said, like, have at it. And it didn't work out so hot.
Nope. So you're right. We got to have
some guardrails. Zero Signal is brought to you by Hampton North. I've been responsible for building and turning around cybersecurity programs for companies where a lapse in security just isn't an option. Finance, high-tech, AI. Different domains, but the same truth. The programs live and die on talent. And no strategy ships without the right people who share the right DNA. That's why I partner with Hampton North. I've built 3 cybersecurity teams with them, and every time they move faster than anyone else without sacrificing quality. While other agencies are still pushing paperwork, Hampton North already had vetted candidates in front of me. Their executive search is not one size fits all. With one of the largest networks of security leaders in the US, their leadership roles hit the market in days, sometimes hours. And their go-to-market practice covers CROs, CMOs, revenue leaders, and full team build-outs for scaling cybersecurity businesses. They meet every candidate, they reference every story. If you're ready to build and scale and grow your security program, go to hamptonnorth.com and see why brands like Clear, Instacart, Airtable, and OpenAI trust Hampton North to build great teams. Check out the link in the description. But your point's totally taken there because we're navigating like humans with plus an easy button is a dangerous combination, right?
Yep.
So we got to navigate that. I think you're onto something though about like this direction of travel when it comes to having explainability, having the data such that can we trust these systems? So there's the guardrails. Can you evidence the guardrails? Can you demonstrate they're there? There's something that I think the Drata community is getting really good at, and you've talked about, which is this idea, this directional travel towards continuous assurance. I wonder where you think that part of the problem, or where's that in the solution story when it comes to like AI systems? And because if we are more load bearing on these new processes and new agentic systems, we're going to need to be able to evidence them in a different way. And maybe we can finally get rid of the sampling from the big four, from the SOX, SOX days of this and move towards something a little different. So I'd love to get your take on like, where are we going with continuous assurance, and are we ever going to get rid of like sampling as a means for attestations? Please say yes.
Yeah, I hope so, right? And not only that, but with some grace for the times that we do have instances of where control doesn't perform as expected. And I used to work for a large organization where their executive team, one of their C-level objectives for the year or expectations was 0 exceptions on all reports, right? Whether it be your SOC 2 report, whether it be ISO cert with your major or minor nonconformities, all that was like 0. And we're like, you know what kind of behavior that drives? One of 2 things. One, like people are going to hide this stuff and really like not fix it, or like, hey, there's going to drive some unethical kind of behaviors that we need to make sure that doesn't happen. Number 2 is we need to build a ton of automation to get to that point where we can monitor every single instance of a control operating to the point that when it does fail, we have the ability to recover and do that. And I think that's driven this next generation of of continuous automation. I think it was also driven by most of us wanting to spend our lives doing more important things than taking screen prints of 25 randomly sampled, selected, items where it's the point where, but that's all been driven in the past by our auditors and their rubric for grading. Like when I was at Ernst & Young, we had, the SOC 2 assessment criteria, and AICPA put out like, hey, we're looking for reasonable assurance. What does reasonable assurance mean? It means a reasonable assurance. You're like, it's not absolute assurance. And so, but the reality is for us that really want to continuously doing what we're saying we're doing, we need to have that continuous kind of like automation flow to capture things that are there. Now, with AI, I think we're moving that further. I think Drata, we just released today the AI agent governance platform. It's part of the whole ecosystem of hopefully eventually from the grassroots of using agents internally by our people, also using agents externally by our third parties, to the point that we really can surface up to our customers to say, we're doing this the way you expect to do it. We've discovered all of them. We know where their critical flows are in here. We have governed them, and we're continuing to monitor those. And we have the ability to, like you said, just like Forky wants to find himself in the trash all the time because he feels like, hey, I'm trash. I'm going to end the trash. At the toys like, no, don't go to the trash. Like same thing here with the AI agent capabilities. We're like, that we can't allow that to happen, have those monitoring capabilities. So that's going to be helpful in that greater trust story, especially when it comes to using agents in our control flows. When we've gone to continuous assurance, one of the biggest concerns is we've turned into kind of security operations team where Burr goes the money gun of findings of control failures. And then the GRC team's like, dude, we need a GRC engineering team to build new automations. But man, y'all are sending stuff over the fence to the GRC operations team that is like, I got 100 failures just last night. I go figure these things out. Having agents go through and fix those. Really excited about that to help. And again, we need to have that be audited to the point that when these agents are in the loop to help fix these control failures, that they're doing it in such a way that auditors can show up and be like, no, we actually trust like what the agent is doing, and here's the log, and here's the defensible like outcome, and here's where it found, and this is the actions it took. So yeah, I think it's the next flavor there.
I was going to say, when it comes to, I think we are seeing an evolution in like the GRC world as a whole. Like, how do you see it for the people? There's different types of people working in GRC right now. Some of them are at Ernst & Young and Big Four, etc. Like, what do you see the future of a career in GRC?
I love this question because it's an exciting answer. It really is the builder side of GRC, that GRC engineering side of the house, where you have to truly change your mindset from that Ernst & Young auditor where you're taking a randomly sampled selection, you're setting it over the fence, you're having to do walkthroughs, and to the point where it's like, no, like, okay, we still need to do our homework. I think that's a really important piece that many people skip over, especially when they adopt a platform like Drata or others that are out there where they're just like, if I do, cool, day 1, we integrate all these systems. Day 2, we have all these findings. Day 3, we're like, cool, like we fixed the findings. Day 4, we're at audit. But they don't take a minute and step back and realize the intentionality behind it to say, what is a control? Okay, a control is a point in the process that helps mitigate a what could go wrong or a risk that we can stop that from happening. And when they understand the whole end-to-end process, then they bring that to the table to then be GRC engineers to say, like, do we need to do it this way? Yes or no? Okay, cool. Yes, awesome. Everything makes sense. Okay, are we monitoring this control point? And we have all these like programmatic APIs now where we can pull that. Now we have connectors through our AI agents capabilities we're using now to actually reach out and then do those checks for us. And so ultimately, I think it has that. If our GRC team members are not flipping that bit in their brain to say, I'm no longer an auditor. I'm no longer a GRC person. I'm no longer a person going through and looking at spreadsheets and screen prints. And I am someone who's having to learn this next generation of like, how do I interact with APIs, or how do I pull this evidence for this thing? And so even our own team internally has had to kind of up level that. Now we have a powerhouse of incredible GRC team members internally on my own team where they've gone through and like looked at all the controls and like, are they all the ones that we really care about? Because there's some controls out there that Drata comes to the table with like, hundreds of controls in our Drata control framework to really help with the mapping. Many GRC teams don't take a moment and really look at those controls and say, what is my goal? Some are like auditor fearing, so they want to make sure the controls the auditors care about is their goalpost. Some are like risk fearing, where they're like, I want all these and I want to prioritize them. But doing that first step and then go into the GRC engineering space, and then also using our capable AI tools to do some of these things, again, it's required that mind shift change where we are now technologists on the GRC team, not just auditors.
We had Ayub Fondi on the podcast
I
not
love
too long ago.
Yeah, one of my favorite people.
Exactly, right? We just love him to pieces. And like his whole mission to move GRC engineering, like I'm just like so supportive of that, because you're right. When you start thinking differently on how you do your job, you can think about your job differently, right? When you start changing on the mechanics of how you do your 9 to 5, you can start to now think about, what am I here for? What am I purpose? You can kind of unlock this higher order thinking to your thing of where we're getting. And then you have to, then we could be using GRC truly. He has a really good point, which is like, if your GRC platform or your GRC is a specific program can't unlock a novel insight to your CISO, it has failed its purpose. And I thought that was a really good point, because so many times, like in just lived practice, is like the CISO or security leader comes in, they have their mind made up. They're like, this is the most important thing. GRC, prove it, and that becomes like how we prioritize the risk register. But really, if it's a good engineering function that you've got, they're going to surface up things that you haven't thought of yet.
Yeah. For me, I think someone told me a while ago, it's like the measure of true leadership is meeting people where they're at, instead of expecting them to meet you where you're at. And so when you sit down, and I love, the thinking of that CISO to come in like, hey, this is how we should do it. But the reality is like, hey, I like to embolden my team members to feel like they have that authority to really say, hey, we're on the ship together. Like, if you don't like where we're going, like, I want to know, but teach me something to say, hey, like, we can do this more effectively or more efficiently. And y'all are the ones that are closest to the actual work. And like, if you feel like you've resorted into that space of mundane, repeatable, this doesn't make any sense, and operational, like, man, there's so much more life to live than that. Please let me know. Let's work on that together so that I can learn something too, to be like, oh, I learned so much from my security team, where they're like, Matt, yeah, that's how we did it 10 years ago. This doesn't make any sense. I mean, not saying I'm coming to the table archaic thinking, but at the same time, it's like, no, I actually love where we're going and what you're doing here. And that whole mindset, one of the things I love my security team for is they're like, hey, that whole Benjamin Franklin quote around like an ounce of cure is worth, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound in cure, right? And so it's like, how do we invest more of these poker chips on the preventative side? Sometimes I forget that we need to do the detective side. I'm like, we got to do some stuff there. But when you talk about that piece, that's one thing we continue to work on. Hey, what are some preventative things that I've never thought of that they bring to the table that's been helpful to learn there too?
Yeah, and again, just to underscore that, re-architects are rethinking leveling up the GRC. We had Andy Ellis on the pod, and I just love him. He's got the whole series, How to CISO, and I was working with our GRC team at Sysdig, and we were thinking like, okay, how do we kind of re-anchor our risk programs? Because there was some communication stuff, some things need improvement. And I go back to his How to CISO, and he's just got this incredibly long post on like, here's how you do like risk management, right? And there's just one line. It's like, ask the question, what is an unacceptable risk? And that goes to your point of like, you can come out of the box with a ton of frameworks.
Yeah.
And you can say like, my auditor cares about this, or I want nothing to go wrong ever, so I'm going to look at all of the control frameworks. But actually the real question is, go ask the leadership team, how do you define an unacceptable loss? If you talk to an airline pilot, they're fine. They're like, well, they have a super answer. Don't lose a soul. Like, we can crash the plane, fine. Everyone has to walk off. It's like, we'll figure it out. Everything else we figure out. But that's the thing. It's like, so what does that mean for your organization? And then you can back into the rest of the mechanics of how you get the controls to prevent the unacceptable loss.
I love that insight, because sometimes I'll show up to talk to the executive team, and it seems like security, legal, finance, those parts of the organization just speak risk naturally. It's just part of our language. But then when you get like the CEO or the CRO or the chief customer officer or others, where you have those folks in the room, and they're like, wait, risk? What do you mean? Like, our risk is, dude, we can't miss the quarter, or like, our risk is like, oh yeah, so she probably, yeah, exactly. And so it's a great question to start with, because it's getting them to start thinking about, what are the real risks here? There's obviously more risks than just the security technology risks that we think about more often. It's more of the strategic risk, or like the risk of like opportunity costs we're going to miss here. Really cool stuff.
I like to think about it in the sense of like, everyone's dealing with risks. You've kind of got people who are focused on downside risk, and you got people who are focused on upside risk.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to max. So everyone's like, the CEO's like, I really want to make sure we don't lose on the upside risk.
Yeah.
And your CLO's like, I really want to make sure we don't maximize the downside risk. Like, how do we cap our downside risk,
Totally. I remember talking to some CFOs who were like, hey, is this an acceptable risk? They're like, I'm not okay with losing $10,000. I'm like, oh, wow, we got lots to talk about. Like, stuff like that, right? So obviously the thresholds are different, but I like that question.
So why don't we head back to like the AI agents piece? I mean, I think it would be, being at Black Hat, we can't not spend a few more minutes talking about AI. So, and you kind of were starting to like tell us how you were thinking about Drata, but I'd also, just as a CISO, how trustworthiness in a system that is agentic, in a system that is inherently non-deterministic, how do we go from a world of like, how do we start demonstrating trustworthiness? Or better yet, maybe the better question is, how would you recommend we start architecting for trust in these agentic systems? So let's just get some thoughts on that.
Just putting those multiple levels of checks that you usually don't need to put on humans, right? We'll hire someone, and it may be a GRC professional that's been in their career for like 10 plus years, and they know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. And so as a result, you're like, cool, I can take this component of my brain and wholesale offload it on you, and generally trust that you're going to do 80 to 90% of what we expect in general, if it's a really good pairing and hire. Like you said with AI agents, it's like, You don't have that. You have something just like literally, hey, cool, foundational model just got cut. Wow, this foundational model decides to just break out and start hacking these other companies. Like, we got some things to put in place. And it seems like we have to architect it foundationally with additional checks that we wouldn't usually have on humans, to the point that either it's built in the foundational model from as part of this training, or we have the checks and balances in place. It's not just, this is like human on loop, human in the loop, but AI agent in the loop on steroids, if that makes sense. So Zumba really is checking all these things like, nope, you can't go that way. It's just, again, the non-deterministic feature has that risk that we have to build in, that associated preventative risk to kind of help make sure it stays on the rails. I think that's like the foundational architecture I'm thinking about it as well, to just make sure that we have those checks along the place more than we would usually have with a very capable, qualified, good judgment human. Like, how do you quantify, or how do you like architect, or how do you program good judgment into a model? I know they're working towards that, but at the same time, we have instances where good judgment is not happening in some cases. So to the point where we're like, how do you actually measure good judgment?
I mean,
I think
we're
that's where
still
we're
struggling with humans,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
So,
totally. You're absolutely right.
we assume reasonable, we do our best, but there's plenty of questionable judgment in the humans I've run into. But look, I totally get it. I think it is, I think the biggest challenge right now is a lot of people assume with agents that, hey, you guys know not to do that, right? Like, no one would ever think to do this. And that's where these left field situations happen. And I think it's a learning experience. And I think if you can kind of build that foundational, like, that's the people who are getting ahead. And like, I look at it from a hiring perspective. AI governance is everything right now. It is the hottest space in hiring. And it is like, people want to go fast, but the guardrails, the seatbelt is just so important.
Absolutely. And you think about leaders, our new role is orchestrators, right? And so you think about that at a day-to-day level. It's how do you orchestrate all these different things? Honestly, I think it's an ADHD or brains cocaine, to the sense that you're like, oh my gosh, like, I have 20 plus different things that I could literally just keep going, do whatever direction I want to. Oh, you're done. Cool. Here you go. Here's your, and I just love it, because you're just, that creativity level has never been unlocked to this level of capacity and capability, to the point that you can really get more done than ever before. But going back to your point around, how do we build trust in these over time, right? Like, even just the knowledge capability is really important there too. Like, I have a 12-year-old son who just asks so many questions that I would never have the answers to. And I remember being infuriated, because I think we were in our Tesla and I was just turning on Grok. And anyway, we're a little unhinged in the car as well. So we have that enabled. We're like, hey, Grok, tell us about this. And I'm like, you are not right. That is not the right answer. And Grok is like, yeah, I'm sorry. And so, but it totally gives us the wrong answer sometimes. And my hope is Grok gets better, or embedded a model that will give a more capable answer. But we've had to limit our son's access. I think it was ChatGPT for like, it was like an hour, or like 20 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day, but to also hear him rage about it. But it's been helpful to, my point there is, even just the knowledge that it's giving us is at times ones that we want to make sure is true, because we're so easy. We're like, oh, that's the case. Cool. And then we make decisions on this. And then just to find out that we were given the wrong information ahead of time is also a real risk and pain. Even to my own 12-year-old son, where I was like, I want to make sure you're getting the right information, but oh man, please. It generally has become pretty trusting. And so it'll be interesting to see how that continues to morph over time too.
I wanted to anchor back. You mentioned like the dopamine hits, like doing 20 things at once. A lot of people I know have ran into almost this like productivity burnout, where it's like, oh my God, I can do so many things. Why would I go to bed?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if that's something you've run into, or like it's big. I think it's very addictive.
Oh
right?
yeah.
And I don't know if that's something you've run into, and how you've maybe managed to like handle that.
Oh, one of my closest friends, he's like, I can't sleep anyway, so might as well just keep doing this all night long. He's like, I'm doing this and doing that, whatever. It's absolutely hilarious to see how much he's able to build. And that's been fun to kind of corroborate too, to be like, oh, cool. Like, and I think you'll sometimes see some of these reels where like someone swimming in a pool is like, hey, me working over the summer with Claude, and it goes over and it updates the prompt, it goes back to swimming. You know, like, and so, I mean, that's like kind of the tease there, but the reality is like, yeah, like we're now orchestrators. And I definitely see that productivity burnout, to the point where, especially for someone neurodivergent in that space too, where it's a really rough time to be able to see where you're hitting or nearing that or flirting with burnout, definitely see us way more susceptible and jumping into the point where we're like, we're doing way too much. Like, what really matters, let's go back and anchor on those values.
I've seen it within my own company, where I've seen one of my colleagues and kind of in it right now, and I'm like, I need to take a week off of just, because I think it's really easy. Also, tasks that I think still need critical thinking, conflict resolution, tough conversations. I think it's really easy to be like, okay, let's go to Claude. Let's find the way to respond to this email that's going to get me and it's like, no, like, you need to go through the process of handling tough dialogues and tricky situations. And I think it's really easy to kind of outsource that ability to think critically. And I think that's my biggest fear with someone who leans on it almost too much. And I don't know if that's something you've run into as well.
Yeah. I think it's another thread of the movie Idiocracy that's going to come to reality. If we don't rectify that, we're like, yeah, we got to definitely keep that critical thinking in the whole pathway, because if not, it's going to be a struggle bus in the future where we're like, no, we need to have the critical thinking. And no more enraging is it than to receive an email that smells of AI slop.
It's the
right?
worst.
Yes.
Right. And it's amazing though. How, it's
the LinkedIn feature now seems like AI slop.
Totally. And it's like, you're right. That critical thinking, going in just line by line, looking through yourself, like, it's really important to make sure you take that human Passover thing. Is that right or not? So good call.
To the point, it actually annoys me. Like if I've got an email where I've sent and I'm like, I know you're responding, it just sends my blood red when I want a real response.
Yeah, absolutely love it. That's why I got Connor's emails. I'm like, this guy reads his emails. And he actually, Connor,
this guy's Claude reads his emails.
My prompt is very well
This
tuned.
guy's prompt is so lined up.
I think I asked you yesterday, I was like, what do you use it? Because there's this small sense of that maybe what's going on here, but at the same time, like, please tell me what you've trained and what instructions you give. So you sound, I feel totally heard in all of this. And then B, like, you respond to something. So again, that's another example where I'm like, I was really impressed with you. You're like, he's definitely
the prompt
using it.
for you is you get empathy. He just gets the asshole version of mine.
He's trained it up. It's like, that seems like a well-written email, but it took 4 seconds. Like, what's up here?
Totally.
I'm just very good. So okay, Matt, so as we start to wrap here, I want to get your take on something that's really CISO oriented. So you've been building its security programs, as I mentioned at the beginning, across all these different organizations. Yeah. What is it like, and what is the difference? I know you mentioned the weight, but like other than that, like being a CISO at a cybersecurity company, how is that different than a CISO at a B2B company? Like, walk us through that, because I'd love to know just your take on this, because they are different programs, there's different weight, and there's a different way the community responds to them.
Yeah. What I learned quickly are 2 things. One, you have to approach a company as if it were a blank canvas, especially if you're starting the program from the ground up. I know many of us will come in with a checklist of things, like, I'm just going to run this playbook here. And honestly, I find that doesn't work as effectively as it might be to really truly use your creative brain. Because I think the creative art of being a CISO is truly applying what matters for that particular company at that particular time. And no greater result is like, hey, like, this is a piece of art that is very different than another piece of art that happened at another company. So that's one. It's like, one principle is like, hey, just approach it yes, you've got the principles. Yes, you've got the background. Yes, you've got the experience. Yes, every company needs an MDM, and every company needs like endpoint protection. Everybody needs like a CSP. Those are very common threads throughout all the organizations that I've been at. Now, what provider may be different, but those are still risks that need to be covered. So those are kind of the similarities. The difference, though, is it's just a different blank canvas. And sometimes you come into a company where there's been a CISO before. I've always been super careful of ever speaking negatively of a prior leader, just because I'm like, man, I sure hope to God they've got the same level of grace that I hope that for me, like, because I'm sure when someone comes after me, I'm like, please, first thing I say is, you're going to find that I missed, and I'm going to feel so bad, and please be nice. But the reality, that's another thread, is like, you're going to come in where there's a canvas that's already started with art, and kind of go through and kind of work through that. Almost like if you have a tattoo and you're like, actually, I want to kind of change it. And it's amazing what tattoo artists can do to really take something that was like, this is great and it lived its time. I want to expand to this, and you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. So I think of that when it comes to that. That's the first one. The second, it's very different from every company and every single one of those programs. And we'll get to the cybersecurity thing in a minute, but like, is that relationship building? I started a couple of programs at the beginning where I'm just like, I'm going to go get stuff done. Let's go get done. Let's move. But I did not pause to take a moment to get to know the people I'm working with at the executive level, at the team level. Those relationships, once you take even just 30 minutes, getting to know where they're from, what they're interested in, and stuff like that. Some people don't appreciate it on there, and that's fine. But from my end, it seemed to be a thread of connection that, like, for me, I've always seen connections. It could be a CISO at a direct competitor. Like, I've always seen connections with others at a higher plane than anything we do. And as a result, I think that creates a connection where it's like, man, we're going to be in the funk together here. And the things are going to get pretty hairy, but just know that at human level, we've got that connection. I think that's the difference between just because the flavors are different, and you have to connect with the people differently. But the relationship forming thing is, I think, a concept that needs to happen through there. But those are some things as you thread through the security programs that I built that have been either common or different. The last little bit is just around, and so, as a CISO at like 3 other companies prior to this one, and now this is a cybersecurity, company, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like 3x the role. It's like way more than I expected before. And it's like, okay, not only am I running and operating the day-to-day operations of a security team, a GRC team, I have IT as well. It includes some of the AI enablement pieces. I had like business applications as well for a bit where you're like, oh my God, like that's a role in and of itself. And you're like, oh, hey, Matt, we want you to be on this podcast. Or, hey, Matt, I want to be on this webinar. Or, hey, Matt, I want to go speak in front of these people. Or, hey, Matt, like I want to talk to this. So you got that part, the thought leadership and field-facing stuff. And you got, hey, these customers want to feel like we're doing what we're saying. They want to have a conversation. Like, cool, I'll show up and talk to customers. And then last but not least, it's like, wow, we're customer zero of our own product. We want you to influence the product and the company strategy. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is way too much for a human to take on. And so honestly, that was my brain. Like my biggest fear in life is to be bored. This has been the most action-packed 3.5 years of my entire career, to the point that I'm loving it. But at the same time, it's like, I've hit burnout the hardest in my career, at least I remember, I think it was a year ago that I woke up right before Black Hat, turned over to my wife and I was like, should I just quit? This is way too much on a human right now. And it was just, those moments are so deep and so painful to the point that you're like, what guardrails am I going to put in place to get me from, because you literally have to crawl out of like a cave at that point to be like, I need like 2 or 3 days off to just like rethink, is this where I want to go? Because you get to that burnout point and it is so painful. But anyway, so I would say the weight is heavy, obviously the pressure, but also the demands of the role are pressure. And so, this last year I've learned several principles to kind of help. One is, just a second ago, we were talking about the Waking Up app with Sam Harris, and meditation daily has been very helpful to reground me. I suffer just crippling anxiety and panic when it comes to speaking in front of people anyway. And so that's been another one.
You would not know.
Yeah, you've cried.
You were just here with gracing us. And it's like,
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. It's been a journey. I would say, like, I remember just, I don't know what it is, but it's always 30 seconds or so right before you get on stage and you're like, oh my God, it's happening again. And so having really good therapy to work through those things has been really helpful. Another one's just, I've been a people pleaser my entire life. I don't know if it's my upbringing with religious aspect or other stuff, but to the point where I just really need to like, hey, say yes to all these things, to the point that you're like, wow, like I said yes today, but 6 weeks later I had no idea I had all this other this is like packing up to the point of like, there's no way. And realizing I got to reset those boundaries. And so there's some really good things. I think Mark Manson always has some really good stuff with his latest podcast. He puts out some really good things about what really matters and what doesn't. And that's kind of helped me realize what boundaries even mean. And so now it's like, hey, I need an ROI associated with this event that I'm going to go to. What is that going to look like? Hey, okay, we're going to go travel there. Like, can I do like once this month? Because I also want to be a dad. Like one of the CISOs that I admire, she just left and claimed burnout in her role. And I've never resonated more with another CISO when they left their role to say, I'm leaving because of burnout. And I have kids, and I have 4 kiddos, right? My oldest is like 18, youngest is 9. I'm like, there's so much more in life than this job. Even though I remember even an HR person said, Matt, I remember just sobbing on the Zoom meeting, and he was like, Matt, it's just a job. And I was like, what? Like, you're HR, like, yeah, you're supposed to give me like, I was like, but that realization, like, you're absolutely right. And so more than anything, I think just setting those healthy boundaries of this last year has helped me get to a point where I'm like, all right, I can at least be a happy human and enjoy this stuff. And then having an outlet, I'm a huge raver. I absolutely love EDM. And so there's a festival this weekend, there's a festival next weekend. I was like, I don't know what it is, but as my brand, I just love the lasers, love the lights, love the sound, love the community, love everything. It's actually where I'm at my most peaceful state, which is the weirdest thing.
Which is nuts because the music is insane.
Totally. But to the point where I can have these deep thoughts where like, am I doing what I want to be doing in life right now? And it actually comes back to this. So over the last year, I share that just because when I think about this role, CISO to security company, CISO in general, just to help others on this community, because the burnout, the impact, the mental health impact is so massive to the point without that level of help, it can be pretty catastrophic, like to life, to a family. Those impact is a result of not being able to rectify that along the way. So I share that only because, it's been an interesting drive.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that, because there are so many people who are going to be feeling what you felt and been unable to articulate it and not realize that there's someone else who's in the same boat. And it turns out it's a whole lot of us, myself included.
Is that you, Conor?
We're all together.
I feel very seen and very heard right now. All right.
Good. Awesome.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the pod, man. We've loved having you. And again, I hope you have an excellent time at Black Hat.
I appreciate both of you. Thanks for what you do for the community. Thanks for having me on. Love learning from both of you, and this is awesome.
If today's conversation gave you something useful, a framework, a question worth sitting with, a way to position something you're already dealing with, that's the point. Connect with Conor and I on LinkedIn. The links are in the show notes. Tell us what landed.
And if you know another security leader who's navigating the same pressure, text them this episode. We'll see you next time.